Welcome, one and all, to the world's finest show. I'm Kyle Hudson.
And I'm Ray Gordon.
And it's been a long week, as they all seem to be these days. So we're going to be talking about some crazy stuff. We got comic book news. We're actually going to be talking some sports today and video games. So let's get right into it. I don't know about you. If you're a long-time listener to the show, I know that we now started doing these on video, so maybe you're just tuning into us now. One of the comic books I talk about a lot is X-Men, and one of my favorite stories is called God Loves, Man Kills by Chris Claremont, and it was the basis of the X-Men 2 movie, very loosely based on that, but it really strikes into the allegory of the X-Men as an other community, right? Like they were the allegory for Black folks at the time when this story was written. Nowadays, they stand in for the LGBTQ community a lot. But I lent this to Ray not that long ago. And Ray, well, real quick, the reason why we're revisiting it is because it's being republished. Marvel is republishing it in 2 parts with extra pages. And Ray, when I lent that to you, because I think that was one of the first X-Men stories you ever really sat down and read. It was like, I remember I gave you the Death of Phoenix, because that's the story that the Dark Phoenix saga comes right before this one. And then this is like the second one you ever got. So as someone who isn't as steeped in X-Men lore as I am, what was your opinion of God Loves, Man Kills?
Well, considering what I knew about X-Men the whole entirety of my life, it was a stark dissonance, I want to call it. Like, it was X-Men, but there was a lot of social issues being handled, being talked about, a lot of real life issues. And I had to remind myself that I was reading a comic book and not a newspaper. It was very revealing, both outwardly and inwardly. And I liked how it colored it all in with comic books and action-y stuff and, just mesmerizing tales and wonderful movements and screen time or panel time. But at the end of it, I feel like I learned something.
Yeah, the opening scene when it's like literally 2 young Black children being chased by a group of white people who are intent on murdering them, quote, quote, mutants. And seeing that and the behavior of them, like just thinking that they're not even a human, right? The dehumanization of it. And then after the tragic thing, you actually, it's not graphic, but you see it happen more or less. And then Magneto shows up, and people forget now because part of his backstory used to be that he was a Holocaust survivor. That doesn't make sense by his age now, but back in the 80s, he was a Holocaust survivor, and he is like, never again, right? He's never going to let mutants, his people, be treated like this again. That's a big part of Magneto's philosophy in X-Men. And that scene has always really, like, of almost any comic book I've ever read, just because we always talk about on this show that you can tell a lot more truth through fiction. By framing it where it's mutants, he's able to tell you a story and make you kind of experience it in a way that kind of separates it, where you can kind of see it for what it really is.
It's also stepping into another reality. Like, when you open up a comic book, you are essentially stepping into another reality and immersing yourself in it. Like, you're putting on a mental movie with a book in your hand or with pages in your hand. So when you feel that, and our culture is really run by the media and movies and what we filter in through our eyes. So you feel that with actual real life topics, in the same medium that you're getting it from, that you wanted to see the Wolverines and the Nightcrawlers and the Jean Greys and the Storms. But, it's not all about the magics.
Well, yeah, that's what I always tell people. If all you get out of these stories is like a few cool kung fu moves and an explosion, like, you miss the meat of a lot of these stories. I mean, look, some are just plain, muscles and pouches, but a lot of these stories do. Like, I mean, Batman, right? His whole thing is he wants to help the people who are suffering in Gotham. And I mean, Superman is the whole, the truth, justice, and the American way. And I don't know, I always tell people, because it is a standalone story, right? It's not, it is part of the larger X-Men continuity, yeah, but it has a beginning, middle, and end. You don't need to know anything as long as you know who Wolverine is, right? You know who Cyclops is. You can kind of just jump in and read it. And if you can go find it at your local comic book store, they're republishing it in 2 volumes because I hear they're expanding it. I haven't actually had a chance to check out the republished version yet, but or I'm sure your local library has it. Check out your local library, and it's one of the most powerful comic books I've ever read, and it's a huge influence on me, especially since I read it when I was younger. I mean, I don't think I was a teen. I think it was like in high school maybe when I read it for the first time. But kind of segueing from comic books, which is my world, to sports, which is your world, we had another little bit of what is the right word for it? Discrimination, or coming from the Philadelphia Eagles, your favorite football team.
Yeah.
So why don't you explain to the folks what happened?
Well, a few days ago, Deshaun Jackson had shared something that was way too close to Hitler.
And Deshaun Jackson is a wide receiver on the
receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. Way too close to anti-Semitic feelings and beliefs. And I read the comments. I didn't just read the headlines. I actually saw the whole story for what it was. I could see the miscommunication, but there is no room for anti-Semitic feelings. There's no room for any body of person's feelings except for Nazis. There's no reason like for that to be at this day and age. The fact that this propensity toward Nazism is still permeating America.
Well, that's why I give what's his name, Julian Edelman on the New England Patriots. He's actually one of the few Jewish players in the NFL, and he actually reached out to Deshaun and was like, "Hey, I'll take you to the Holocaust Museum. We'll go to the African American Heritage Museum, and we'll have some uncomfortable conversations." And I mean, my wife is Jewish. My daughter's a descendant from Holocaust survivors, and so anti-Semitism has no place in my life. But I do always try and give people. I understand that a lot of times racism and stuff like that is born out of ignorance, right? And it's not, and it's something that's learned, right? And so, I mean, if someone is willing to grow, I always give them that opportunity to grow. It is entirely up to them whether they do that, and that's kind of where I make my ultimate decision. I am very disappointed in Deshaun Jackson. I casually watch football, so it doesn't really impact me as much as other people. But when you're someone who has that kind of a platform, you need to be smart about the things you share on social media. I thought his whole I didn't know was total BS. Do you know what I mean?
It was done because it had to be done, and I understand because I am an advocate of trying to see things outside of my point of view. So from Deshaun Jackson's point of view, he doesn't feel like he's waving a Nazi flag. But from the world's point of view, it doesn't matter. You can't quote Hitler.
Well, I always tell people it doesn't ever really mean what you intend. It matters how people perceive it, right? And you have no control over that. You have no control how someone perceives your words. So you have to be, especially when you're in a position. I mean, look, dude, you and I do just this stupid little show, right? And
it's not stupid.
You know what I mean? We do this little show, and I am so crazy about what I put on the air and what I put on, what I say, especially when we talk about these very hot button topics.
Right.
And I just think that, if you're a football player who has hundreds, look at another football player, Colin Kaepernick, who understood his position and stature in the community and leverage that to try and draw attention to positive positive things. I mean, not like police brutality is a positive thing, but like trying to make changes in positive ways for his community. And I just don't understand how sharing those quotes that Deshaun Jackson shared from Hitler and Louis Farrakhan, that like, what are you adding to the discussion? Do you know what I mean? Because I really think that a lot of people out there don't understand. Maybe they're not even doing it for seriously. Like maybe they're not even being serious. Maybe it's just a joke to them, right? It's just a joke. It's for the lulz. But not everyone is perceiving it that way. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I am always a defender of free speech, but you also have to remember that when you say dumb stuff, your community has the right to respond. And honestly, if we're being honest, if Deshaun Jackson wasn't a superstar AAA level athlete, he would have probably lost his job anywhere else for saying that. And I think that's important for people to recognize because, it really does bother me that athletes are given, especially NFL athletes, are given such a pass. I mean, dude, people are just like, oh, well, they can catch a football, so great. And I like I said, I'm always down for people growing. That doesn't mean you necessarily keep your job. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
I don't know.
Unfortunately, the cream of the crop rises above. And some people, will turn a blind eye to the things that their top performers do.
Well, wasn't it Riley Cooper a couple years ago? Dropped.
I mean, yeah, he didn't get fired.
You know what I mean?
So that's like it's like the precedent that they set previously is come back to them. Like, well, you didn't get rid of Riley, so you're not going to get rid of Deshaun. They're two completely different wide receivers, but their ability on the field should not matter when it comes to one's character off the field. And it is what it is. We're living in the aftermath of someone's misinformed publication.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The more I've read about it, the more and the more I think about it as we're talking, the more angry I kind of get about it. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's an angering reality.
I mean, it's like it was Hitler, dude. Like it's not like someone who's like questionable. You know what I mean? Like that's
I
like
think
one of the few
even the Farrakhan part of it was like people could have was like, all right. But when you said Farrakhan and Hitler in the same day, something's going to break.
Exactly. Well, I mean, like, dude, what is it? The Southern Poverty Law Center says like Louis Farrakhan is an anti-Semitic preacher, right? That's not me saying that. That's like people who study that kind of stuff. And Jewish people have a long history of being persecuted just for being Jewish, dude. You know what I mean? Like, it's as someone who isn't Jewish. It's something I never experienced, but it's something I do think about because I fear that my daughter may someday have to face that kind of stuff. And so, it really bothers me. And that kind of actually leads us into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was Call of Duty recently removed the OK symbol from the Call of Duty games. Activision, removed it from the Infinity Ward. Is it Infinity Ward, I think, that makes them?
Yes, Infinity Ward.
And for those of you who don't know, I'm not going to do it because it's actually kind of become a hate symbol within certain white supremacist groups. And it's, the OK symbol where you make the circle with your hands and the three fingers standing up. And people might say, that's kind of ridiculous, right? Like, how is the OK symbol a hate symbol? How is that possible? It's because hate groups actually have a history of appropriating already existing symbols to kind of hide themselves as an in-group. It's actually like by design, right? Like the reason why they appropriate something that's widely used so that if someone claims that the OK symbol is they're like, no, it isn't. You're just overreacting. Everybody uses that. right?
Right.
But I can tell you for sure, as someone who is in the culture, it is definitely used as a white supremacist symbol. And I give the Call of Duty folks a lot of credit for recognizing that and taking action to remove it, because I could see it being used in video games as a recruitment tool, right? Like, we already know that people are being radicalized on the internet. And now that everyone's sitting at home in their apartment in front of YouTube, right? Like, the rabbit hole's only gotten easier to find. So, video games are a major recruitment tool with all kinds of radicalization groups. And, I am particularly concerned about the rise of white nationalism in our country. And so it is great to see video games who know, like, 'cause pop culture is one of the major fronts of this whole battle, right? Like, when you start seeing, groups appropriating the Punisher skull, right? Like, Blue Lives Matter groups are appropriating the Punisher skull. What is that saying? You know what I mean? Like, do you understand?
And then there's also the very, like, the way back, the original appropriation of the Ku Klux Klan having a cross and embolizing the church, walking around looking like priests, really, cone hats
Huh.
and symbols.
I never
It's
really
like,
thought about him looking like priests, but you're absolutely right. That's
it
yeah.
permeates, and it's something that hate groups, people who are hateful, they try to take things that are attributed to good and warp them.
The swastika was originally a Buddhist symbol for luck. No one thinks of it
Warped.
that way anymore. It
Not
was
at all.
that symbol for thousands of years, probably. And then a group of people in the 40s permanently changed that. And I mean, I don't know if that's permanently where the OK symbol is going to go. If we work hard and we're vigilant, we can reclaim it back, right? Like the guy who did Pepe the Frog. Did you know that the guy who created Pepe the Frog was not supposed to be a fascist symbol? The alt-right
Right.
appropriated Pepe the Frog, and so what he did now is he got it copyrighted, and he does copyright strikes against anyone who uses it. And unfortunately, that's the only way. And so, like, the OK symbol was going to be used, but I think if you make it harder for them to use it, so casually in video games,
And they're banning people. They're continuing to ban lifetime bans on repeat offenders and stuff like that, because unfortunately the video game world, the internet world in general, is where a lot of hate is spewed.
yes,
There's no retaliation. Like, there's no limits, there's no rules. Everything is chaos, but it's fair because it's chaos for everyone. Everything is chaos, but you got to be careful when you're on Xbox Live playing. I remember back when I was playing Halo 2, how disastrous things got over the headphones. People said the wildest things. Children said the wildest things. So if video games are going to be still used as a recruitment tool, I'm glad that video game companies are taking away their resources for recruitment.
that actually reminds me of, I forgot to mention at the top of the show, we have a guest today. His name's Christopher Bell. He is a writer for Some More News, another YouTube show. And he also creates Gamefully Unemployed. And I actually went to college with him. He was on the show like 7 years ago. And so it's really cool to have him back. But one of the things he said to me after the interview, because so many good stuff happens after the interview, but he said something to me that I thought was really interesting. He said that, on the internet, everyone's kind of a sociopath, right? Because you don't actually see them as people, right? So it's a lot easier for you to degrade or dehumanize people on the internet because you're not face to face with them. You're not seeing them as another human being. You're just kind of like, rah, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I thought that was really insightful. Because as someone who I love online video games, but I play Heroes of the Storm and I'm not very good. And I get a lot of hate, it's really mean. I mean, I have thick skin, so it doesn't really bother me, but I can imagine someone who doesn't, right, and is a little bit more sensitive, like really losing it. And at the end of the day, whether it's, Heroes of the Storm Online or the Magic the Gathering community or your local comic book store, right? Like, we should, if we love these things that we claim to love, or sports, right? Or sports. If we love these things that we claim to love, we should want as many people to love them as well, right? Like, that's kind of the whole reason I started this show, is because I love comic books, I love video games, I love movies, and I like talking about them. And I want to tell all of you, you know, I used to work at Blockbuster. They went out of business, so now I don't have anyone to recommend movies to anymore. So
Blockbuster is so archaic. Every time you say it, I can feel my gray hairs.
dude, I still have the shirt. I still have the shirt. It says management team.
Nah.
Yeah. I wasn't a manager because I wasn't 18 when I worked there. But they gave me a shirt that said management team. Anyway, like, we should want as many people to love these things as possible, right? Like, I would never want to exclude any group of people, whether it's, you know, Jewish folks or women or black folks or you know, anyone, from the things that I love, because the more people who love it, the more financially successful it will be, and the more stuff we get of it, right? Like,
right.
Like, and I don't know, it just, I never understood the people who are like, this is mine. You know what I mean? They're like Gollum. You know what I mean? With the ring. The process. You know,
mine, all mine.
You know, like, and I just, like, it's mine and only mine. And it's like, no. These things, the reason why, I mean, I can't speak for anyone else but myself. I'm still a weird guy. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a nerd. I love comic books and Batman and Spider-Man. You know what I mean? I'm 34 and I play Pokemon with my wife. Like, but that's my things I love. And I want other people who love them to, or people who aren't aware of these things, like comic books, right? Like something like God Loves, Man Kills. It's such a profound story, and or Watchmen. Like, if you've never read comic books, I want you to check out this thing, right? Because it tells you a story in a new way. Or one of the things we're going to cover on another episode, Metal Gear Solid, right? We were talking about Metal Gear Solid 2 and like the ending of that. And if you've never played video games, you're missing out, man. There's some great stories. And I don't know why you would ever want to push someone away from this stuff, right? And so, I don't know. I want to create an environment where everyone's welcome. You know, I hope that, you know, as our show now transitions from the radio waves to the internet, we're able to maybe build a little bit more of a community of similar-minded people who, you know, love the substance of these things as much as the surface.
Right. People who think.
Right. Because, I don't know, I think, as we said on the show a lot, pop culture is just a reflection of our reality, right? I think that you can look in the past and you can watch X-Files and it's a total artifact of its time, right? So, yeah, I think that's enough of my soapbox for today.
Right, the interviewer is probably going to be like, what gives, Kyle?
I know, right? Well, yeah, so we have an interview today. His name is David Bell, David Christopher Bell, and he is a writer. And well, I'll introduce him when he comes back from the break. So stay tuned for an interview with David Bell. He's a podcast writer and producer and host. So stay tuned. You're listening to the world's finest show on KeystoneDigital.tv. We'll be back after this.
Come on!
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Villaverde.
And I'm Zach Ging. Growing up, we had a difficult time understanding the issues that impacted us as Asian Americans. We had the questions, but didn't know where to find the answers.
So together, we created a podcast and embarked on a journey. Tune into our podcast, The Situation Room, a show that dives deeper into Asian America through hard-hitting topics, cultural cuisine, and shares our own stories.
You can find us on KeystoneDigital.tv and get access to all of our content and more. Or find us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.
Welcome back to the world's finest show. I'm Kyle Hudson, and in this segment, I am joined with actually a very special guest. David Bell is a podcast writer and host, and he's actually been on the show like 7 years ago. He was one of our first guests, so I'm super excited to have you back. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I think you were actually the first thing I ever had my voice on ever.
Really?
Yeah, I had no experience being on podcasts or at the time a radio, and I had no idea what I was doing on your show. But thanks for having me then, and thanks for having me on now.
Oh, dude. Well, you used to work at Cracked, and
That's
you
true.
wrote an article about memes, which I share with people all of the time. Like now that I do politics and stuff like that, anytime I see like someone like, "Can someone help me with memes?" I'm like, "You need to read this article first that my friend wrote." And dude, I've shared that article with so many people. It's one of my favorite political writings of all time.
What article?
It's the one that like memes you help spread or secretly propaganda.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, about how kind of the meme system is almost like self-made propaganda at this point, like the format, the misinformation. Yeah, I gotta go back and check that out. I'm honored. Thank you.
And now you make, and like I don't know. So I've been wanting to have a lot of the old guests back, but you kind of happened organically because I was watching this show on YouTube called Some More News, and it's like one of my favorite shows on YouTube. And then I mean, I've been watching it for like a month, 2 months at this point. I've watched like almost all the episodes, and then I'm like, wait a second, because I watch the credits, right? Because I'm like, you know, I make stuff, so I like look at the credits, and I'm like, David Bell? No, and then because I know your style of writing, and I know your type of humor, and I was like, yup, because you used to do the pop culture disorder one, right?
Obsessive pop culture. I used to write for most of the Cracked videos. I didn't come up with anyone. I wasn't like a main writer on any, but I contributed episodes to a lot of the Cracked videos.
But you have a very unique voice.
I've been told people were like, oh, I know that's one of your episodes.
Yeah, you definitely have a voice. It's something I'm very jealous of because it's something I'm still working on. And for those who aren't familiar with Some More News, how would you describe it?
Oh man. It gets described as like I don't know, an angrier daily show. It's hosted by Cody Johnston, who is you know, the brain behind Some More News. He originated it at Cracked actually, and it rolled over after Cracked laid everybody off. And it's a show kind of just covering anything in the news, mostly politics. I assume people would describe it as left leaning. Because it very much is. But we're you know, we start from research always. So I'd like to think it's based on facts. I don't like calling it a news show. It's more like an entertainment comedy show than anything else.
Well, the one thing I'm always impressed, it's longer form than most of the other people out there doing it, which I appreciate. And it's very clear that you guys do your research. I mean, I'm a wonk. You know what I mean? And it is so awesome to hear like heavy policy, because you know a lot of the other shows that do it, it's more about like The Daily Show or Last Week Tonight. It's like entertainment first, information second.
Right.
Where I feel is you guys are more information first, entertainment second. Like it's more like a George Carlin approach to things. Like you're gonna laugh when it's over, but I might make you feel very uncomfortable in between now and then.
Yes, it is not. I don't think it puts people in a good mood. The show necessarily. We try to make it light and we try to make it funny, but yeah, we're often needing to get a lot of information out at a time, and I think that's been our mission. I think that's Cody's mission, is to be very informative. He works on a few podcasts as well with Robert Evans, like Worst Year Ever, and Katie Stoll. They have the Even More News, their podcast as well, and they're very informative about these things, and they like to dig into it. So that show is, I think, a lot of times we hope that show is something that that people will show their relatives and friends to kind of get them to understand a certain topic, usually a perspective on it.
Oh,
But
I do that all the time. I've showed my wife so many things. Like, I think I was telling you when we first reconnected about you did an episode on John Krasinski's
yes,
Good News, and honestly, like my wife was all about it when it happened, and it was just like something about it just rubbed me the wrong way. Like I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was just like something about this. And then you just nailed it. You nailed exactly what was wrong with it. And you did like 2 episodes on it, and I was like the first one was really eye opening. I showed to my wife, and she was like, "Man." And then when we watched the second one, I was just like, "Yep, you hit it right on the head. You absolutely nailed it." You know what I mean?
yeah, it's hard not to feel like the bad guy with that because he's so charming. That's his whole deal. He's a everybody loves Jim from The Office, but what he did was the more you dig into it, the more insidious it is, and the more cynical it is. And I don't know. I think it was important to talk about. It started as like a fun little gripe because Some More News had a segment called Some Good News for a very long time before he came out with that show. So at first it was just like kind of shaking our fists at him. But then like I legitimately just thought, yeah, he's probably an okay guy. Like he probably never saw the show. It's a coincidence. It's fun to give him crap about it. But then the more I started digging into him, it was like, man, I don't think this guy is very good. He says a lot of weird stuff about the CIA, and like all of his projects in one way or another have come from kind of stealing ideas from something else. And the more you thought about him, the more it was like, yeah, he really is just getting by this one role that he had. And it's not a very important thing to point out, but I thought it's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's what I really appreciate about Some More News. I think that you guys definitely, I mean, there's a lot of low hanging fruit out there, and you guys seem to go past right all of that and then go at the stuff that I think is a little bit more important to talk about. Like you guys did one on the intellectual dark web, right? That was one of the most recent ones.
That was the recent one, yeah. That I wasn't involved with, but it was a very good episode.
But yeah, I mean, like just breaking that kind of stuff down, it's very valuable. I think what you guys are doing is very valuable, and it's a fun show. And I highly recommend if anyone has, just check out. It's Some More News, and then what Even More News is the podcast.
Yeah, is their podcast. I'm sometimes on that every now and then. I was on more before the pandemic, but they've been having a variety of guests. It's a very fun show. I do research for them for that one as well.
So
that one's Katie Stoll and Cody. Katie is the producer of Some More News as well.
So that's not all you do, though. You are a very busy boy.
Yes.
I know that you also run Gamefully Unemployed.
Yes.
Because we talk about video games a lot here on the show. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what that's all about?
Sure. This was started with myself and my colleague Tom Ryman, who is the friend of mine from Cracked, and we Cracked laid off a lot of people. There was a big purge, you could say. And right after that, everybody was sort of looking for things to do. And myself and Tom were actually, our project right before we left Cracked was starting a Twitch channel. So we were like, well, let's just do that anyway. And that sort of evolved into a podcast network. And we still stream, but not nearly as much. We mostly put out podcasts every week. We have a couple regular shows like Hypecast, which is just movie news. We have a show called We Just Watched, which is us reviewing usually whatever movie's out that week. It's been a little difficult lately, so we've been straying off the beaten path. You
guys have been doing like classic movies, right?
Yeah, we did No Holds Barred, the Hulk Hogan movie this week. And yeah, we do various other Patreon exclusive shows like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, which is him and comedian Jeff May going over Batman, like the animated series and stuff like that. We have a show called Fox Mulder is a Maniac, which is based off my love of the X-Files, which is a show going through every episode of the X-Files and sort of deconstructing the fact that Fox Mulder should not be allowed to be an FBI agent.
Dude, I think it was you, and I've longtime listeners will know I've brought this up on the show before, but I think it was you that put the thought in my head in college when we were talking about Fox Mulder, and it's like, I mean, he's literally like totally ignoring all probable cause, no
Yep.
warrants. He's just kicking in the door, being like, "Where's the aliens?" You know, like,
It's an amazing. There's layers to it because I think a lot of police shows you can watch and see a lot of like, bad police work in the TV show. Like there's a lot of very illegal stuff that they do on those shows, but the extra layers that Mulder is constantly talking about aliens and Bigfoot. So he'll get these like people who've been abducted that are likely like in the real world would be very serious crimes. And like his first theory will be related to aliens or mutants or something. And it's so incredibly irresponsible what he's doing. And then he just becomes, in some episodes, it's just a downright rampage, the stuff he does. Like when
dude.
Scully gets abducted, he literally hijacks a gondola at gunpoint. And it's like it's weird. The thing it's many, many layers, and he's a great example of the extremely irresponsible character, which of course I love because I grew up on the X-Files.
Oh, dude, Bad Blood is one of my favorite episodes of television
that's
ever.
the
vampire
one with Luke
one?
Wilson, yeah.
Yeah, and he like in the very beginning like chases some guy out and stabs him in the heart with a stake, and then it's like, oh, he wasn't
Yeah.
really a vampire.
He murders the kid from The Sandlot. The only reason he spoilers for that episode, the only reason he gets away with it is because the kid turns out to actually be a vampire. But what are the damn odds of that? Yeah,
I know, right? Like,
it's incredible. They lean into it in the later seasons because they know it's funny. And that's one where like the FBI is getting sued because Mulder drove a stake through a young kid's heart who he was convinced was a vampire. And he gets phenomenally lucky about these things.
yeah. Did you see the newest seasons? Did you watch all the way to the
The
end?
revival, yeah, I liked them all right. They had Darren Morgan episodes, which I really like. Darren Morgan is one of the better writers. He's like right up there with like Vince Gilligan as a writer for the X-Files, where he used to do the weirdest ones. I
People
think
forget Breaking Bad guy cut his teeth on X-Files.
Yeah. I think he did Bad Blood, actually. I'm not certain, but he did like Jose Chung's From Outer Space. He did Humbug, a lot of the classic ones. And he did in the revival 2 of the best episodes of the revival, which was the Were Monster one. I don't know. Did you watch the revival?
Oh, I did. The Were Monster one was so good. So
It's
I went out and got a
incredible.
job.
That was amazing. Yeah. And Camille Nanjiani on that as the villain. It was yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I enjoyed the revival. The revival knew to be a little silly and still knew to do kind of the legacy episodes, the like mythology stuff. So I was pleasantly surprised by it. It's weird because coming off of the season 9 finale, it was very it was hard to imagine any more episodes after that, and they kind of have to ignore a lot of what happened in the original finale, I feel like, but it was
That's
still
what they
good.
did with the movie. Do you remember the movie?
Oh, I hate the first movie was great. The revival movie was man, what a piece of garbage.
But seeing Mulder with that crazy beard. That
Oh
was
yeah,
awesome.
that was great.
So what were you gonna say?
Oh no, I was just gonna keep talking about the X-Files. It's fine.
Well, I was gonna ask. So what are you watching now? Like we've been talking a lot about what people are watching. While we're all locked down.
Oh yeah.
What have you been catching up on? Any new stuff or classic
Uh,
stuff?
The newest thing, I've been rewatching stuff. I rewatched the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Do you remember that show?
Dude, that's a good show.
That's a good show.
It ended on such a weird cliffhanger, but it's such a good show.
Yeah, I wish it wasn't canceled, but the cliffhanger almost works. It exists in the era between TV was like less network TV and more like Netflix type. Like it's in this weird, so it's like it's still TV, like old TV, but it has like a lot more shocking moments in it, and they deal with some really serious stuff. I liked it. The newest show I've watched is Devs, which I really enjoyed. Devs.
I haven't watched that one yet.
Oh, it's Alex Garland's show. I think it's on Hulu.
Oh, is that the one that has what's his name from
Nick
Parks and Rec?
Offerman?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's if you ever saw Ex Machina or Annihilation, That was
Yep.
Alex Garland's work.
Okay, I loved Annihilation.
Yeah. So it's a sci-fi miniseries. It's only one season. I highly recommend it. It's really, really, really fun. It's that same Alex Garland stuff where it's like real mind blowing, in fun ways. It's dealing with a lot of, weird concepts. I thought it was a very good show.
Have you seen
Nick
Future Man?
Nick Offerman's great in it. What?
Have you seen Future Man?
No.
Ah, dude, that's the show I always talk about.
Really?
But oh yeah, dude, you gotta check it out. Just to watch the first season on Hulu.
Okay.
It has 3 seasons, but the first season's kind of its own self-contained story.
Sure.
For time travel. But yeah. So what else? What else? Have you been on any of like the HBO Max shows, or have you messed with Apple Plus?
No, not really. I need to. I've been working throughout the pandemic, so I've been very
I know the feeling.
yeah, I sometimes I feel like I don't watch anything unless I have to do a podcast about it.
How about Harley Quinn?
Oh, Tom
you
has
seen-
been watching Harley Quinn, and he
Dude.
said it's really good.
Oh my God. So my wife and I got DC Universe, just because I wanted to see Swamp Thing. I heard really good things about Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
About
I heard good
halfway
things.
through, we stopped watching Swamp Thing and just dove into Harley Quinn. It's one of the best animated shows I've seen. It's definitely for grown-ups, definitely not for kids. But it is so, if you're a DC fan, like here's the thing, my wife doesn't read the comics.
Yeah.
But I do. And she enjoys it just as much as I do, but for different reasons. Like, they had one episode with Mr. Freeze, and there's so many callbacks to the Batman the Animated Series episode, and you're just like, oh man, this is amazing.
I heard it roasts its own content,
Mhm.
That sounds really fun. Because Batman, it's a very silly universe. So like something like that. I really should. I don't have it's the DC Universe app.
Yeah. And then you could read some Batman. Are you a comic book guy?
Not really. My podcast partner, Tom, he's a big comic book nerd, so he kind of fills out that side of it.
Right on.
I like the movies are fun. But I've never read too many comic books.
So your focus is mostly movies and video games.
For the most part, yeah. I wasn't even that big of a video game nerd until I started streaming. Now I'm like, I got a PC, I got Steam. I've been playing like weird games on Steam and been.
That was gonna be my next question. What games are you playing?
Yeah, well, The Last of Us 2, of course.
Oh, dude. So I don't have the time for that right now. Like I was like, I want to get it. I have a PlayStation 4, but I just don't. I have a child, and I just don't have the time between everything I'm doing.
I blew
It's good
through
though.
it. It was like a spell that had to be broken because the plot is so good, and the characters are so good that like I played for like 8 hours one day because I was just like, I need to finish this. I can't live my life like this. Other than that, I've been playing a lot of Minecraft actually with a group of us do, including Cody, the host of Some More News, is a big Minecraft fan. And so it's more like a hangout spot than anything else, but that's a fun way to kind of connect with people online and stay in touch, and just like screw around on Minecraft. And then there's Dreams on PS4. Have you seen that game?
I have heard of it. I haven't played it though. Is that the one where you make your own games?
Yes. Me and my friend Abe Epperson, who hosts a podcast network called Small Beans, which is another like ex-cracked folk. But that we've been developing a game for the last 2 months on Dreams, and we spent about maybe 130 hours making this game. That's about a 2-hour game, and it's a dumb little game. But that Dreams is incredible because it's kind of hard. There's a steep learning curve at first, but if you're interested in like making games, which is something I wasn't that interested in, you can pretty much do whatever you want in that. People have recreated other games in that game. There's a Fallout simulator in it.
I don't know if you know, I do programming and stuff like that on the side. And I created, in the time since I interviewed you last, I created an augmented reality historical walking tour.
Oh,
And that we had like 300 locations as far west as Minneapolis.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you can look up Time Machine Tours. You can't download it anymore. I turned it off when the pandemic happened because I didn't want to be liable for sending people out in the world and stuff like that. But Yeah, dude, I love that kind of stuff. And actually, I have been, and I guess this is a premiere on my show. I haven't told my listeners this, but I've been working
Ooh.
on a little game in the background too,
Ooh.
using JavaScript and stuff like that. So I know how fun it is when you're like, oh, does this work? Oh, the logic isn't. It's
Oh.
making it do something that it's not supposed to do.
Yeah. Dreams has a really good logic system too, because I have no background in programming, but I've started doing the logic in that. And it's like we made like a combination safe. And when you think about the logic of that, it's like you have to have the right combination programmed in and then all the other combinations programmed in. And it becomes very simple. They have these little microchips that you plant in, and then they have like, pieces of logic that you just drag and drop and attach wires and stuff like that. And they make it very visual and straightforward. That I think someone with a programming background would think of it as like, kind of a baby version.
No, I'm
But
still very interested in it. I'm gonna check it out because
I think it could rope a lot of people into the industry. It's a good gateway.
well, and also having like ways to test your stuff like that's the big problem is when you're making stuff is having someone to test it, right?
Yeah.
And like a lot of times, like when I was developing this my app, it's like they needed to have test flight and all these other things. Like if it's just a PlayStation 4 game that they need to plug into their PlayStation 4, that's an easy sell. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like so I'm definitely gonna check that out because it's been on my list for quite some time, and I would love to see your game when it comes out because
Oh, sure. It's on.
we'll do
it's
a
on
review. I've been wanting to
Dreams.
do more reviews. I've been wanting to do
okay.
more reviews. So your game, I have a Final Fantasy VII review, and your game will be one of the first reviews we do.
All right. I mean, it's a two first-timers making a game on Dreams. You can only play the game if you have Dreams, is how they do it. It's like on
I guess I'll have to go get a video game.
They will. I think they're eventually going to change that and make it available to everybody. And they're also going to have VR soon. You can make VR games on it, and I'm very excited for that.
Dude, my buddy has a VR set up in his apartment. Like, he lives by himself. I'm so jealous. Well, not jealous of the fact that he lives by himself. I love my wife. I love my daughter. But he has a room that's just, like, empty. And
Yeah.
it's like a VR room. And he
That's
has the
awesome.
whole thing set up. Dude, I went over his place right before the whole thing happened, and we were playing, like, this crazy beat game. And you're like,
Oh, what is it,
arms are
Beat
going
Saber?
up. Maybe. I don't know what it was called. But it was just, like, it was so awesome. And
I
I'm like,
have the PlayStation VR, and it's like there's a Bridge Crew. It's a Star Trek game.
I've heard, dude, Be Still My Heart. It's the one I want to play more than anything else.
It's great because you could just hang out on the Starship Enterprise. Like, I'm a big TNG fan, and they have a TNG bridge, and
Nice.
it's just like getting to just sit and be in that environment. I don't even want to play the game. I'm just like, it's like just relaxing. There's a lot of cool like Zen uses of VR.
Well, you know what's funny? Like, so my buddy Kerry, I haven't spoken to him in forever. We reconnected when the COVID stuff happened. I was like, let's play Star Wars Battlefront. And he's like, I don't have a microphone on my thing. I'm like, all right, fine. So I'll just give you a call. So I call him on my phone, and I'm like, all right, so you're getting in? He's like, yeah. And he's like, wait, are we going to be on the phone the whole time? I'm like, yeah. like, what are we just going to sit in silence and just like, no. And we wound up like, talking for 2 hours and stuff like that. And it's video games are a great way to reconnect right now. When
Yeah.
it's, you can't go to the bar. In a lot of places, bars aren't even open. And I've been really trying to encourage locally. I built like and if you want to check it out, if you're listening locally, I built on Facebook a little group, where people can sign up and say, here's my username, here's the stuff. So like on Saturday night, you don't have to feel all by yourself, because
It's a cool idea.
I mean, it's just I think video games are such a neat, and like nowadays there's such a low barrier to entry. There's free to play stuff on your computer, on your phone.
Yeah.
There's games like Magic the Gathering Arena or Hearthstone, which don't cost any money to play, and you can still have fun with your friends and neighbors. And I don't know, video games
there's
are.
a Tabletop Simulator on Steam where you can play board games.
Dude, do you play Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh yeah.
You do.
We for a while on Gamefully before the pandemic, we had board game nights where I would live stream a group of friends playing board games together. So we started diving into a lot of the nerdy games there, and of course D&D. We had a couple D&D groups.
See, I feel you could do D&D over this though. I think you do it over like Skype
Oh,
or
yeah.
Zoom or whatever. Like, actually, I work locally. I work on the mayor's opioid task force, and I was like gonna do like for people in recovery D&D nights, right? Because like
Oh, that's great.
right, and I think that then I was like, well, why stop at people in recovery? You know, the whole point is to destigmatize it. Like, let's have just a thing on Friday nights that
Yeah.
people could do. If you're in recovery, that's great. You're welcome. But if you're not in recovery, you can still come and hang out with us and play too, right?
Oh yeah.
And it was like literally the first night of it was, I think, 2 weeks into the COVID pandemic. So it never actually wound up taking off. But I want to get back onto it. And I've been talking with people on like doing a thing like this for it. And I don't know if you're interested. I'm trying to get a game group together, so maybe we can get you in the mix. Although your hours, you're all in,
My
you're in
hours
California.
are. I've been attempting several D&D games during the pandemic. The problem, like, I feel very lucky to still be working because a lot of people don't have that. But boy, I also could could use a little time off from this.
I was
It's-
telling people the people who are working twice as hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you know,
Right.
like-
It's also working from home, something I've been doing for the last 10 years. I've never figured out how to pace myself. It's just it's not something I'm able to do. I'm a workaholic. So like it's when you're your own boss, it's really easy to just be like, you should be working harder. You should be working harder. And to like be a terrible boss to yourself. And I don't know
Well, yeah,
the solution.
you should
I wish
track
I did.
hours. You have to track your hours when you
Yeah.
work for yourself. Like, I mean, I think what I do is a little different because I do more client. Like until recently, I was doing more like with clients, so it's
Right.
easier because you were like tracking the hours and you didn't go too crazy. But when you're doing your own projects, man, yeah,
It's impossible.
well, and I'm like I'm a binge worker. Do you know what I mean? Like I will take a day off, just mess around, play video games, and then like for the next 48 hours do nothing but my project.
Right, because you just want to
And-
get it. You want to clean that slate of things. You just want to get it all off your to-do list at once. It's hard to do a little at a time.
So do you have, well, you mentioned some more news, Gamefully Employed. Is there any other projects you got going on right now?
Ah, geez, what else? What else am I doing?
Whatever do you want to plug?
I think that's it at the moment. Definitely check out some more news. I write a lot of those episodes. I don't write them all. And I've been doing that for, I don't know, a few years now, and it's a very fun show. And yeah, Gamefully Unemployed. If you like, it's funny because the two things are very different. Because Some More News is pretty heavy. Gamefully Unemployed is very low stakes. It's talking about movies for the most part. So if people just like nerdy movie stuff, check us out. That's pretty much it. People can follow me on Twitter at Movie Hooligan. I
Yeah,
never
you are-
plug my Twitter.
Yeah, dude, you are one of my favorite people on Twitter. That's
Oh,
how
thanks.
I reach out to you. I mean, I follow a lot of people, but there are only very few people that I like constantly check in on. But your stuff is like so, I don't know. You're a comedian pretty much. I mean, I know you don't really identify one. You don't
Yeah,
really do stand up or anything like that, but you are a very funny guy, and your writing is very funny. So
I would call myself a comedy writer, I think is the appropriate term for it. Yeah, I'm definitely, I'm not a performer. I never wanted to perform. When I was at Cracked, people didn't know who I was because I wasn't in videos or podcasts that much. But sort of, times change and you have to put yourself out there because otherwise you can't make money. So like it was necessary for moving on from there and doing podcasts and stuff. So I'm getting used to it.
well, you're very, very talented, and
Thank you.
whenever you have no more projects, I hope to bring you back. Hopefully, it doesn't take 7 years to get you back next time.
Yeah, anytime.
Because I honestly think you were like, I have to go back, and when I'm putting up the old archive.
Oh,
Because
cool.
we just switched to a podcast, so I have to go through I had to take down all the old episodes. I have to pull out all the copyrighted content because we were protected, through the radio station, but we're not anymore.
Yeah.
So I have to pull that all out. But your episode, I have to think, is like either the third or the fourth episode we ever did.
Wow.
So I mean, that was back in 2013.
Yeah, it
was
was
when we
before I
had
was
you.
at Cracked. I was living in Massachusetts, and yeah, that's
So-
that's wild.
So
gotta
when I
listen to
have
that.
that up, I'll send it to you. Because I think that was back when our show was only like a half hour, 20 minutes long.
Oh, weird.
So I'll send you the clip when it's live on YouTube. We're going to put them all up on, and this is just a message to all of our listeners. We are going to be putting all of our shows up on, all of our old shows up on YouTube because it doesn't cost anything to host them there.
Oh, yeah.
But anything else you want to plug before we say goodbye?
No, just thanks for having me on. This was great.
No, absolutely. David Bell, he's the one of the writers on Some More News. He also is part of Gamefully Unemployed, and you can check him out on Twitter at Movie Hooligan. Please do so. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you.
All right. Once again, I want to thank Dave for coming on the show. Always, yeah. I mean, like I said, it shouldn't be 7 years before the next time he comes on here. And we'll also be, I'll dig through the archive and I'll try and find his old episode and throw it out on the streams because I think that would be kind of fun. But anyway, we're coming to the end of our show. Ray, what are you going to be watching? What do you got in the hopper?
Huh. Well, my wonderful fiance, Janet, has never seen The Wire, and it is on me to enlighten. Don't worry, everyone. I'm going to do my job well. I have to enlighten one on The Wire.
Dude, when I learned Stringer Bell was British. I mean, 'cause that was the first time I'd ever seen it before. Because what's his name?
Idris Elba.
Idris Elba, right. Oh my God. But is he the first season? Is he in the first season?
He is in the first season. He is. It's going to be a wild ride. We're going to fight through season 2, and then it's all going to be fantastic.
Season 2, dude, I don't know. The more I
liked it, but I understand.
It's not bad. It's just about it's such a weird show, but every season.
And it takes place in Philadelphia.
Yes, they do. No, it doesn't. No, it takes place in Baltimore.
No, the season 2, that's Philadelphia. I think I might have to do some double checking, but I'm pretty sure one of those seasons was a.
Well, because I'm pretty sure that the politician in that show is actually based on Martin O'Malley.
Okay. So they cut over. They cut over to Philadelphia.
Oh, it's entirely possible. It's been years since I saw it, but yeah, man. For me, the 3rd season and the 4th season about the school, that hit hard because it's like the 2 seasons about gangs, one's about unions, one's about like a school, and one's about the newspapers and politics.
Right.
It's very, very interesting.
What about you, Kyle? What's going up on the hopper?
For me, the one I would probably recommend is I'm rewatching Lost. my friend Tarek was like, we were hanging out the other day, or not the other day, but like a while ago, and he was like, Kyle, have you heard of this show called Lost? Like, he moved to America maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, and so he wasn't here when it was on TV. And he's like, have you heard of the show Lost? It's amazing. You should totally check it out. I'm like, dude, like, I've seen every episode of Lost like 3 times, and I actually used to write for Lostpedia. That was like one of the first internet like blogging things I ever did. And so like after I got off it was on the phone. And after I got off the phone with him, I looked up and I logged into my old Lostpedia account, and it had been 10 years, like almost 10 years to like the week since I had posted my last thing on Lostpedia.
Wow.
So yeah, for those of you who don't know anything about Lost, it's about a bunch of people who crash on an island, but it goes like way crazier than that. And it is, I love that show so much. I love it so much. It's like a Rorschach test. Like, I remember watching my friend and I went, the last episode, they had this thing in theaters, right? We went down to the theater and they played like a couple of the key episodes, and then they like question answer the creators. And I just remember like one person was like, I am a really religious person, and this show is like my favorite show because it like reinforces all of my religious ideas. And then another person stands up and is like, I'm a total atheist, and I love this show because it reinforces my atheist ideas. I'm like, this show's insane. Because it's like man of science, man of faith. And then the smoke monster. One of my favorite lines, and it's not a spoiler at all, it's from the first episode when he's like there's the smoke monster, right? And it's like, rawr, it's like knocking down trees. And they're like, was it a dinosaur? Do you think it was a dinosaur? And he's like, no, Hurley, it's not a dinosaur. And he's like, how do you know it's not a dinosaur? And he's like, because dinosaurs are extinct. But that's all I'll tell you. It's all I'll tell you. So The Wire is, you can watch The Wire on HBO Max.
Yes.
Which we should do a thing on HBO Max. I don't think we did a thing on that since that's come up. And I think Lost is still on Netflix. I'm not sure. See, I have the DVDs. So yeah, I am like that old school.
DVDs.
Dude, I have it is. I'm pretty sure because I watched them so much. I think it's the only series I have the entire thing on DVD.
Wow. I think the only series I got on DVD is season 3 of House.
Oh, I have some South Park episodes, some seasons, and I have season 5, which actually has a couple episodes that they don't show anymore. We gotta talk about that, then pull in the episodes. I think that'd be interesting too.
That'd be scrubbed.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about that. Well, I mean, I understand where they're coming from. I do, but I'm also really not big on censorship. So it's like my thought is, and we'll talk about this in the next episode. Is it better to completely remove things like they've done with South Park and 30 Rock, or is it better to put things in context like they did with The Sound of Music? So that is what we will discuss on our next episode. See, we're getting more structure already, Ray.
We're getting it done.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. I want to thank David Bell for coming on. I want to thank you, the listener, for tuning in. We do it all for you. This show's been made possible by electricity and brought to you by
Light.
So that's it. Have fun, be safe, and until next week,
Keep geek.
woo!
The world's finest show.